Well, how you doing? This is Dr. Lemmon, and this will be my March talk. Uh, I'm going to kind of promise to keep it short. I know the last two were kind of long-winded, and I heard back from a few people. I know everybody likes those 15, 20-minute talks, but there's a lot of data. So this year, I'm just talking about ideas. I didn't particularly teach any of these concepts and ideas. Some of them got integrated in. I played with whatever was available to kind of wake people up and have them pay attention to what's going on in their life. It wasn't so much about, what Chris thought. Um, so Martin Heidegger was kind of one of my favorite philosophers. Once again, I'm a person that does a lot of reading, but I kind of like background. I like philosophy. Heidegger had two things that it wasn't real successfully popular because of the time that he came into play. He was tied up in Germany during the old fascist event. And so that kind of shuffled him around. He couldn't teach or do anything for a few years after that. Um, but as a philosopher, I liked two things that he brought forth and and that I kind of apply to some relative degree in all of my training and stuff. So there are ideas that I am talking about that are a little bit shorter, but I can say that I implemented some of this more into concepts coming forth. One was that Heidegger was really famous for starting his talks and his lectures like at 8 in the morning and go to 8 at night. So there'll be a 12-hour day. Yeah, they would take breaks. There were even events where he had a house in the Black Forest, and a lot during World War II, why the colleges were used for whatever emergency needs that the military had, Hitler had. And so he would take and go to the Black Forest to his little house and have students come and camp out around in the Black Forest, and he'd do lectures, and then his family would feed them and during the lectures, and he actually had them sign in to a book. And the story kind of about that he did that ledger so that he could go down and say, I did a talk, and so therefore he could justify getting paid for being a professor, for being a teacher during the war, and not have the college or the students at the college be available to it. So a lot of people that signed into his lectures and his talks that came during that period of time were people that really didn't live in Germany. They traveled into Germany, into the Black Forest for his talks, which I thought was kind of impressive. Some of the names were obviously Jewish names, which were people that at the time with Hitler would not be living in Germany. And so they actually snuck in to catch Heidegger's talk. So, eh, I don't know. I don't know how true any of this, but anyway, that's the data. There's a multitude of books about him. But back to the theme, I'm looking at two things. And like I said, his talks were long-winded. His rule was ask questions, but the goal is not to answer questions, to make more questions out of them. So he'd start at 8 in the morning and everybody would throw out a question that they're harboring. And then he would start with one person. He'd say, okay, everybody, how many more questions can you make out of that? Let's keep going deeper. Let's keep going. As we build questions, we build range. All of a sudden, if you ask enough questions, pretty soon the answer is not something that you have to do something about. The answer is going to be something obvious. It's you living the experience. It's just now adapting to the bigger range rather than the narrow range, thinking this is what I got to do to get from point A to point B. If we look at some place going from one way to the other, there's a multitude of different ways to get there. So that was one of his themes that he was renowned for was asking questions, asking questions. I'm not here to answer your questions. I'm here to teach, which means teaching is the opportunity to ask questions and learn more. Ask questions and learn more. We got into the idea in school, we ask a question and then we find the answer. Search engines then become the model for the world today. And really, it's kind of like you go into a search engine and you look at 20 or 30 different answers, you get a lot more diversity. If you could read all of them, I don't start with love, but if you can read all of those, you get a diversity of them. I know a lot of you guys do that. Then you start to see, oh, well, I can see that this is a range. The answers are a lot of different ranges. Go to a dictionary and you look at all the different meanings for a word a day. You start to realize, wow, and there are resources available. You could search that word and see how all those meanings developed and how and who was the first one to start using it in that form or changing the form of the word or expanding the concept out in range, which is what we do with language. So that was the first step. I I never really believed that we're seeking an answer. I'd always been involved in life and my teaching and my education and in my business and by being able to see where I could go with it, expand the business model, get more interaction out of it. I didn't want to fine tune anything. Um, and now today we know that experts in something means that it worked very, very hard to become an expert in something, but they don't stay an expert very long. If you have a lot of diversity in topics and then you know a lot about a lot of different things. And then all of a sudden you pick one, maybe a favorite that you excel in, you wind up, when you reach that level of expertise, sustaining that expertise level for a longer period of time. You can adapt and change and stay in the lead longer because of the diversity you had in the background. So that's what he was trying to say. So ask questions, and you see me do that in my talks in the last few years. You, I'm support the idea of doing meditation. I like short meditations, but I support the idea of doing meditation. I support the idea of going in with a question and write down questions. I get these folded sheets of paper. I got notes all over the place, and I simply do a meditation. I write down these, and I start to search out those questions and see where they're going to lead me and what they tell me to do. And so that's been part of the platform. The other thing that we get a lot of New Age thinking on and a lot of stuff that comes up in the metaphysical world is about being in the now or being in present time. And Heidegger started to address some of that material. Um, I'm not going to do any quoting. I promise to keep this short. So let's talk a little bit about the difference. And my first recollection of it was I was in first and second grade and we were doing these spelling bees. So everybody would stand up, the teacher would give you a word, you spelled it correct, you stood up. If you got it wrong, you sat down. And I remember sitting there looking at it thinking, what is the goal? I mean, for her, the goal is to get you to spell the word. But now everybody's participating. Is everybody here trying to learn to spell the word? Or are they all competing? It's the only way we can get kids up here to learn to do something is might make them compete because then we build associated information, competition, and with the learning so that we're all struggling always in a competitive way to learn rather than a friendly way to learn. Hmm. So it was very simple. When I would stand up and we were all spelling the word, they would give me a word. It didn't matter what the word is. Just, I don't know. And they sat down. And then I sat there. I was out of the game. And then the teacher would put out a word to somebody and they would spell it. And I'm sitting there, got some notes. I scribbled things down and they would say the word and I would write the word down. I would write the word to see if I knew it. I would write it down and they would spell it and the teacher would correct it. And I could see whether I did it or not. It's like, wow, this is kind of fun. I can do this at my own pace. I don't need to have a competition. I don't need to have a value. I don't need to have any of the above. Like, wow. So they say the word, she says the word, they spell the word, she tells them right or wrong, talks about it a little bit, goes to the next word, and I can take notes down. So now all of a sudden I have an interactive play into it that's not based on a competition. It's about me having a relationship with it, either in getting it right or getting it wrong, but either way, in learning what's going on. So I guess I've been a self-learner from that whole model. A lot of times when a teacher would turn her back, first and second grade, and she'd be writing on the board, we had a piano, an upright piano in the corner. I was in the front row. I would get up out of my seat, go over behind the piano. All the kids saw me. And I'd stand behind the piano, sit on the floor, and listen to her. So I didn't have to look at her. I didn't have to look at the board. I didn't have to do it their way. I could just contemplate that. All right. Uh, I didn't know how to put that in terms. I don't know why I did that. But to me, it was a lot easier than if I was sitting there and she's trying to get an idea, she's pounding away at different things. I felt all that pressure. when I was hiding behind a piano, I didn't feel that pressure. Then I would get up and come back and sit when she's writing on the board next time, and she in the front row for whatever reason she didn't see me gone. She didn't see me there. She didn't. It's like I'm sure she was contemplating all the things that she had to do, and the room had, I don't know, 30, 40 kids in it. So because it was first and second grade in the same room, so she was looking at the mass of looking at it and not noticing that front row. So it worked out really good. That, so when he starts to talk about presence and now, he's starting to, in Heidegger, he's starting to get into that whole thing of now is like you run away, you run a race and you won. Right now, you're the winner. And so what does that buy you? Well, a little history to the next race. And the next race, if you win by maybe you get a little more credits and kudos and maybe a little more win. But at some point in time, you're not going to win. So it's like, wow, uh, presence is being able to sit with something. Presence is being able to, more the nature of way we humans work. We then contemplate something for a second. We go to a party, we sit there, we sit in a conversation with someone, we act for, but really our goal is not so much the now, being in the now. I know it's kind of a catchphrase. It's really kind of having a presence, being there and attending. So what I learned in first and second grade was just being present with it, attending to it. I don't, not saying I was right. All those kids maybe made more money than me in my lifetime. I have no idea. I never evaluated in that perspective. It just simply, I would watch those kids on the playground. I watched those kids, and by the time we got in fourth grade, they were all very competitive. And I would look at that and I'd say, like, what is this? Well, I don't want to play any games with them because it's like if you don't win, then they pick on you. And if you do win, then all of a sudden they're a little frustrated. They're not mad at you, they're mad at themselves. It's like, why would you have to get all mad? Why all this emotional energy going into something that's a waste? It accomplishes nothing. I just couldn't get it through my head. And so as I progressed through school and went through school and went into college, that became my model. I can remember in speech class, the speech teacher said, okay, any of you people, what we're going to do in speech class, we're going to have you get up and do a speech, and then we're all going to critique it so that you can learn from what you just did. So write your speech out. I won't let you read it, but you'll have your notes up there in case you got to go find it where you're at. We'll pause for you. We're not looking for perfect public speaking. We're looking for you to getting familiar with the concept of speaking. And so he said, I'd give you an example, but any one of you going to volunteer to do a speech? And of course, I raised my hand up, like I can always talk about something. And so he said, what are you going to talk about? I said, I don't know, but by the time I walk from the chair here up front, I'll figure a topic. I'll look around, I'll find something. I saw something on a board, something over there on a sign, car on a stick board or whatever, I don't know. And I got up and I looked over and I go, oh, okay. And I just did a speech for around 15, 20 minutes about that topic. Not that I knew very much about it, but I just rambled on. And at that point, then they all critiqued me and they said, well, it was amazing. You picked a topic you were really knowledgeable on. Of course, that was an absolute lie. I just saw something on the board. I didn't know anything about it. I just made it all up. Um, but I made it up with an idea or a feeling of confidence. They were right. I was I was a good liar, so I most certainly could bring that off and making it up. They had some very good critiques. You'll notice I say the word so too many times. They told me that then, and I still do it now. So obviously, I never learned that lesson. Um, but um, I would kind of learn to kind of go with what I would listen to what I said. I just said something. I listened to it, and then the question would come up: where do I go now? What's next? What goes next with that? Where's that going to lead me to? Those are the questions. And so from that, I could then play with, oh, and there's another idea. Oh, there's another idea. Where all my, they had said in my critique, it obviously it was spontaneity. Spontaneity was the piece. So I didn't have any time to prepare it or make any notes or any of that kind of maneuver. So well, there it was, laid out and presented to the whole group. Um, I didn't think I did very good in that first speech, but I was a good role model for him to pick on and show. And the fact that I didn't get embarrassed by, he said, "You don't mind any of this?" I said, "No, I'm here to learn. If I already knew something, I wouldn't be here. So here I am. I just did it. I have no problem talking. What do I do wrong? Am I talking? Am I not going?" And so I found out real quick. I get a little snippet and sit on that till I got another little snippet. I was moving like step by step by step by step. I couldn't develop a whole range of a picture of where I wanted to be that quickly, or even go with the flow of it that quickly. Presence is being able to go with the flow that quickly, to show up. And, some people would talk about ad lib, they had TV shows, comedians, all that kind of stuff that are up there and ad lib. But really, the ones that I've known to be comedians pretty much had all this written out, had all dialogue, had it all planned out, had all the pieces together, and they would just kind of play with the audience in the presentation. They would watch and read the audience, and where did they get something funny? Where did they get a hit from the audience? And then they would mend everything else to target around that. They were always in an adapting stage because not every audience finds humor in the same thing. Some take offense to it. And so I go, wow, this is really interesting. I did a lot of talks. I think I wound up getting a very good grade out of that class by the time it was done, but never had an issue talking. It just like always seemed like I never wanted to volunteer to talk. So by the time I got to college, I figured I'm just going to volunteer for everything, right? Because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Here I was, all of a sudden, a semi-adult with not a clue in my head. Now I'm a semi-aging old person with not a clue in my head, but I have a million questions. So, if anything, I learned to question everything. And everything that I learned was from asking a question and playing this and playing that. Am I an expert at anything? I don't think so, but I've done a lot of things. I I would do something for a while. Some things would last for 4 or 5 years. I even had a marriage one time last for about 6 years. Most of them were a lot shorter than that. Now, of course, I'm saying that I arrived at something, but I started realizing that some of those things I have to kind of secure into so that I can have some pieces secured. Kind of notice I use the same background all the time in these talks. I'm trying to put a little continuity somewhere into the pieces. Um, I in the old days I would have been out here all dressed up with a coat and a tie on. When I first started doing YouTubes, that was a popular success. Now, I could be, I'd be more popular if I was sitting here with a t-shirt on and 11 million tattoos all over me. That's just the style of the time. In a couple of years, that will be, totally different. Oh, the goal is not to be the winner, is not to be right there in the now, and not to be all the kudos. The goal is to get into that range of it so that you start to question, wow, I can do this. What else can I do? I could do that. What else could I do? Where else could I go with this? What, where do I need to be at? What other experience can I extract out of it? How much juice can I squeeze out of this moment? That becomes the goal in life, I do believe. So I get to people that go, "Oh, I took the test and I got the job," and I go, "Great, that's cool. Let's go celebrate. That's really kind of neat." But in my mind, I'm thinking like, "Wow, the problems are now just starting. They got the job. Now they got to learn the job. And if they want to keep that job, they're going to have to perfect the job. And if they want to have fun doing that, they got to really escalate somewhere along to get kudos along the way because obviously they need that type of support to I had a friend of mine that came to me and said, "Hey, you're good at influencing. I'd like to get this job." And so I said, "Okay, fine. I will help you. No problem." So we did some meditations. We talked a little bit. We had a meeting a couple of times. And finally, the interviews came down. She took all the testing. She called me and she said, I just got the review and I didn't get the job. I said, wait till tomorrow. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, I'm not talking about anything. I said, we did the work. Wait till tomorrow. And she goes, you're crazy. I said, okay, I'm crazy. I got it. Wait till tomorrow. The next day she called me. The person that was offered the job, that did the testing, actually, when they offered it to him, they said, we already found another job, so we're not going to take it. So she got it. And she worked in that business for around 5 or 6 months. And she said, oh my God, I hate this job. So she called me and she said, I hate this job, but I mean, it pays good, but I hate this job. And, and what should I do? And I said, well, you could just quit right now if you think you can carry yourself into something within a week. I've gone through a lot of jobs. I've never been unemployed for more than a week in my life. I found a job. But I would find a job by getting up in the morning at 7 o'clock and going around and spent that whole week interviewing jobs, door to door, wherever it took to get in a job. I don't know how many times I walked in and I'd say, I'm looking for a job. And I talk to someone and they say, well, I'll give you a form. I said, I'm not looking to fill out forms. I'm going to find a job this week. So if you have an opening and you're interested and would like me to give you some more information, great. If not, save yourself the hassle of paperwork. I'm just going to go down the street and find a job. So it's like, and that little pitch got me into an awful lot of jobs. It's like, all right, we'll try you for a while. Good, let's do it. Right? So that's all it took. So what do you want to call that? Confidence? I went into jobs where they said, to get this job, you have to do all these classes. I look at them and said, yeah, I did all this. I didn't do any of them. I didn't know what it said. And then I got the job. And then I had to go do Google search real quick and find out what all those classes were about. And somewhere before the next morning, I had to master them all and go in there and successfully say, yeah, I got all those things. And then I came in and did the job, and nobody demanded that I bring in proof that I did all those. Like weird, right? It's a very, very strange world sometimes that we live in. If you can build this piece up and be in the presence with it, sit with it. I'm not advocating that you lie and be deceptive, because if you lie and get deceptive, you're going to get caught. I'm advocating that you lie and become deceptive and don't do it as lies and deceptions. I'm advocating you do it by being in the presence and say, right now, in this very moment, I'm learning exactly what I need to do to be there. Everything that comes in, I need to pay attention to. Everything come in is a question that I need to address to be able to fulfill this role. So none of that's a lie. There is nothing I need to lie about. All I need to do is learn. All I need to do is ask questions. All I need to do is become. We hear all those terms out there, the becoming, being in the present time. That's what that's all about. Being in present time means I'm in the presence of, right? That's where I sit. I remember eons ago, I was in college and I was in a club and we were setting up speakers, and um, I set up a speaker. At the time it was Eric Fromm. He was a psychiatrist. He wrote the book, The Art of Loving. Um, so he came up to do a talk, and what I did, I sent him a letter, and and I was kind of cutesy and funny, and I read some of his books. I tossed a few ideas at him as questions. Um, I, I'm inviting you to come talk, but before I would want you to come talk, I have 4 or 5 questions for you to see if I would really want you in front of my group. That's what I did. And I listed 4 or 5 questions. Can you imagine? Here this guy is, an accomplished person, an author, a psychiatrist, all the way back to the 40 days. It's like, wow. Um, and he answered my questions and said, uh, I don't really care what you think of my answers, but it'd be curious to meet you. And so I sent an application. I said, I'm not going to read your answers until you're done talking. I'm going to have you come up and do the talk, and I'm going to look at your answers afterwards. The answers weren't important. I just wanted you to pay attention to my invitation. So let me know what dates will work. And he came and he talked. So we were sitting there before the talk, and he said, "Anybody have any questions before I go out there?" He wouldn't. He wouldn't do the Pledge of Allegiance, and this was back. I know some of you people don't remember this. Back in the school days, you had to do the Pledge of Allegiance, you know. And so we had a meeting. We had to do the Pledge of Allegiance. It used to be we had to go to the movies. We had to do the Pledge of Allegiance. My wife and I were, I think, in Thailand, and we went to a movie one afternoon because it was rainy, and we went into a movie theater and went to a movie, and it was so funny. We sat down, and the first thing they do in Thailand is that they do their Pledge of Allegiance. You had to stand up and salute the flag, and then the king of the country would come on with a little video showing how wonderful he was, and then we could sit down on our seats. It was kind of, and I sat there remembering, yeah, I can remember going to the movies and have to stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance in the movie theater. So we had the Pledge of Allegiance, and he stayed in the back. He said, "I don't do Pledge of Allegiance to anybody." I said, "Yeah, okay." So, so we're back there, and he said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a student here, and I'm just kind of curious. As I look at some of these people, some of these teachers have come from the workforce, and bring knowledge from practical applications. Some of these teachers just came out of an educational model and are here teaching. And some of them came out of tremendous amount of life experience and kind of want to get out of business and tone down, maybe have less stress and are here teaching. And here I am. It's like I'm not all that sure that I want to do with my life yet, but it's kind of curious. My question is, when do you when do you no longer a student and when do you become the teacher? And he said, when you pay more attention to how they're presenting the material, you're moving into being the teacher. The information doesn't mean anything. How they approach it, how they present it, how they get tells you then of the questions you're going to need to address to be able you be then the teacher. And so it's like, wow. So it kind of split it for me. And that day forward, by all the classes I sat in, I'm looking about how they're presenting it. How are they doing this? How are they coming about it? And I would be putting notes like, I need to look this up because they discounted it. I don't know why. And this is what they're making important. Are they reading the group, the students, and presenting what would be relevant to the value of the students as a whole? I'm guilty of that myself. Because you're looking at a group and you're supporting the nature group, and you might be isolating people. And so that's what I learned from that. I said, wow, if I isolate a couple people before that class is over, I gotta earmark them, pull them aside and say, you, and you, when class is over, I'd like to talk to you three. And I'm going to be telling them my presentation may not fit you guys. So if you don't want to ask a question in class, don't leave here before asking a question. I'm presenting to the group, and you guys process differently than the group, the three of you. So I want you to know. I even had a guy that would had anxiety. So I'd say, "Hey, you, uh, if you don't mind, would you move your chair over by the door?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, okay." And he's moving over. And he said, "Hey," I said, "I know you're wondering why." And I said, "So in a little bit, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to tell the rest of the class the answer to your question. I'll tell you." So I continued with it. We took a little break and went over to him for the break. And I said, "You have a lot of anxiety. I want you by the door. I have never said anything important in my life. So I'm doing this class. You get anxious. I want you to go out that door, walk around the parking lot, do whatever you want. When you're ready, come back and sit down. You're not going to learn anything when you're in reaction. That's it. So you will, in a little bit of time, when you get past this anxiety, you'll then ask one of someone else in the class. You'll make friends with someone. You say, what did I miss? Why I stepped outside. And just tell them, hey, I was anxious. I had to step outside. I don't want to listen to this old fart. I just like, at, okay. And so it kind of amazing because this guy took classes from me for years because he said he could never sit in classes. He got his degree of all things in accounting. He never did anything in accounting. He hated it. He went into accounting because his dad thought he should go in accounting. A real waste of time. And he said, I've been struggling to find something that supports me in life. And I would never even consider going into accounting, even though that's what I got my education in. So we got along really good. It was just that getting him to a presence, not answering his questions, not being like, there it is, but getting him the presence so he could feel the range of it. He could feel the force of it. He could feel the dynamic of it. Anytime you get into something, you look a word up, and I look at that word and I say that word several times. I like to be able to put it on my tape recorder and listen to it, or now the dictionaries will speak it out loud. And I like to be able to hear it. When I hear the word, I'm going like, what do I feel in that? I know the meaning, but what do I feel in that? What are the questions that come up? How do I define that? How do I get from my experience with the sound of that word and the meaning that's in the book for that word? Where's that journey go? What does that come in? What does that mean? And then I want to get in the presence of it. When the word comes out and somebody speaks it or I speak it, I want to be in the presence of that and not just have something on a piece of paper that I looked up in antonyms and synonyms. So I'm not using the same word over and over again. That's what all us writers do, right? You start to get a drift of it. So I'm going to, I promise, I keep it short. I'm going to keep it at that. We're really looking at presence and the difference between that being in the now and Heidegger and the idea questions. And so if you have any questions, like go ahead. And if you like to, you can look up some of Heidegger's stuff. It's kind of fun to read some of his concepts and ideas. Um, as a person, one little snippet. As a person, he decided that he wanted to be a he was Catholic back in the days when religion was worth dying for, you know. Um, so he was a Catholic, and so he decided Catholic family. So he decided that he was going to go ahead and become a bit of a philosopher in Catholicism. So he went to university to become a Catholic philosopher, and that's what he was going to do. And somewhere in that mix, he found a woman and fell in love. And oh my God, she was a Protestant. Her family was a Protestant. And here he is going to school to become a philosopher in Catholicism, and he's married to a Protestant. And what made it even worse, her family were sweet people. They were really nice. And so it created a conflict in him. It's like, I, I can't take a side here. There's no right or wrong in this, which there isn't. So then he goes, wow, I have to then abandon this idea of becoming a philosopher in Catholicism. So I guess I'm just going to become a philosopher. I don't know what else to do because I've already got a couple of years in this thinking process. And so then he switched over. And so it's kind of like, wow. So he had what I'm saying is he did a background looking at it from one view, another view, and then he went into something totally different and kind of look at the meaning of life philosophy and what it all means. And his famous question is, why did we get something rather than nothing on creation? And that was the Heidegger's famous question. He wasn't the first one to ask that question, but he probably didn't know that other people had asked it before him. But that was the question. Out of flow of energy, out of the ability to create, why did it manifest into something? Why did we get something? Why? Who selected that? What is that? You see, it's a big question. So that was his whole platform going into philosophy. All right. So enough about Heidegger and enough of Dr. Chris Lemmon. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, why feel free to send me questions at chris@wizardscatch.com, WIZARDSCACHE. I'd love to answer your questions. And if I get enough questions on a topic, I will go ahead and throw it. And so I'll have fun in the month of March. And then we'll see what I can cook up for us to have fun with the next month.